The Thirst Zapper, when you first encounter it, is used merely for one boss fight, and it acts more as a gimmick rather than an actual way to defend yourself. However, what if you could turn it into a weapon of mass destruction? A way to actually fight back against the denizens of the Commonwealth looking to put you in the ground? Well, that's what we'll be finding out today. Can you beat Fallout 4 with only the Thirst Zapper? Now, for the rules, first and foremost, obviously we can only use the Thirst Zapper in this run. This video will only cover the main campaign of Fallout 4, as the second rule of the run is for no glitches or exploits, and without those, you can't beat Nuka World within the confines of the challenge. But with that out of the way, let's get into the run. So to start the run off, first we have to go get said weapon of mass destruction. However, there's no way in hell we are going to make it into Nuka World and escape with the gun if we can't properly defend ourselves. And since Nuka World is not being completed with the Thirst Zapper in mind, that means anything can be used in that DLC to get said gun, but that also means that I cannot harm anything inside the base game. So what do? First, we steal everything in Sanctuary, mainly the gold bars and any other charisma boosting supplies like alcohol, and make sure to destroy the chem station here. It's pivotal to the run. Next, we run all the way to Diamond City, skipping everything in between, but we do make sure to talk to Trash Can Carla on our way because she'll be important later on. Once making it to Diamond City, we head inside and steal as much as we can. Watch some guy defy gravity, and then craft great mentats. This will boost our charisma up to a 10 and give us 10% better bartering for 10 minutes. With that out of the way, we head outside to talk to Cricket and purchase the spray and pray, and every bit of 45 ammo that she has, making sure to sell everything not essential and some essential items if we have to. Once this is out of the way, now we head all the way over to the Nuka World Transit Center, and instead of mowing down the Assaultron and gunners blocking the entrance, we parkour onto a roof and then quickly run inside. Once inside, we run behind the trains at the back of the tunnel and wait until everyone leaves. Now that the area is safe, we talk to Harvey, get him to give us the strats on how to operate the tram, and are finally on our way to Nuka World. Once there, we actually want to run the gauntlet. You could do this better than I do because I've completely forgot where half of the explosions were and therefore suffered the consequences. Once through the gauntlet, we arrive at Coulter, and this is where the deal breaker of the run will come up. If you don't have a whole lot of supplies and get unlucky in the storage room right in front of the boss, if you've sold literally everything to Cricket, you won't have any supplies to beat Coulter with. However, if you're way more skilled than I am and can avoid getting hit during this fight, the fight is pretty by the numbers. Essentially, you just squirt Coulter with your newly acquired Thirst Zapper and just rain down bullets with the spray and pray, making sure to hide behind anything you can while his armor boots back up, so you don't get blasted into next Tuesday. Rinse and repeat this 2 times and the boss fight is over. Now that you are the new overboss of Nuka World, you can start exploring your new home setting, and from here you can do this in one of 2 ways. You can either complete Nuka World completely fine because again nothing in this DLC matters other than getting the Thirst Zapper and the upgrade schematics for later on, or you could just complete open season and take everyone out in the process. Now with the power back on, you can head to the World of Refreshment where the Cobalt schematics are being held. You can try and fight the Mirelurks if you want to, but the Mirelurks are built different here, so instead run past and pray to God you have your Stimpaks hotkeyed, or else you're going to have a bad time. Further inside the bottling plant, open the once previous electronically locked door and grab the schematics off of a dead scientist, but before we leave, make sure to take as many bottles of Nuka-Cola as you can, as each one of these is theoretically 1 bullet you can use for your upgraded Thirst Zapper. But because I have handicapped myself with a low strength, I'll just have to settle for whatever I can get away with. But now with the schematics, the Nuka-Cola, and a couple levels under our belts, we can finally return to the Commonwealth to get into the supplies portion of the run. This is arguably where most of the time is going to be spent if you decide to do something similar to this run, because to make 1 shot of Thirst Zapper ammo, you need 5 different things. 2 parts acid, 4 parts copper, 3 parts crystal, 2 parts nuclear material, and 1 bottle of Nuka-Cola. For this run, we won't ever get high enough to look at some of the other modifications, but the list of requirements change depending on if you're using Nuka-Cola Quantum or Nuka Cherry. I'm going to have a graphic up on screen that basically explains where you can get all of this stuff, so feel free to pause the video and jot down any notes if you want to try this for yourself. However, to save yourself much hardship, I highly recommend taking the Scrounger perk and Cap Collector perk. This will allow you to find more ammo in containers, and Cap Collector basically does the same thing, but for caps instead of ammo. So when you combine both of them, you're now getting straight away money and items you can cash in for money at a later time that don't weigh anything. Also, if you have perks to spare or if you're using power armor, please do so, because you're going to be carrying around so many weapons and so much useless junk that with the measly strike that I was using, I was kicking myself every time I had to run back to town. The strong back perk would have helped a ton. However, the other major portion of this run is going to be some source of income. If you're a higher level and you already have your settlement set up and you already have trade routes, you'll be able to get so much stuff and sell it back that you'd almost be net zero by the time you get all this stuff sorted. Because unlike the Walter White run where I got ingredients to make things to sell back at a higher profit to rinse and repeat over and over and over, every time you buy a material in this run, it's going into a non-profitable source for the amount of materials you have to buy. When you go to sell the ammo back, you actually come out negative, which means you're going to be doing a lot of scavenging throughout the run. But as a good way to get you started, you can always do Diamond City Blues, except you're probably asking yourself, okay, well, how did you do it? Well, I did it in the most professional gamer way possible. I went into the Colonial Tap House, watched a man get the shit kicked out of him in front of his wife, talked to him outside and told him that I would help him stick up to the bad guy, and then watched him gun down the bartender. Well, there goes my source of Nuka Cola, I guess. However, he had a note on him, a note detailing a chem deal that I could ambush. Except, how are you supposed to ambush a drug deal without a weapon, you might ask? Easy. You run and antagonize all of the members of the deal, and then run to the police. And when the police don't help you for some ungodly reason, then you lure the drug dealers all the way to the super mutants outside of Diamond City, who will be your saviors for once. With everyone taken care of, there's no one to stop you from taking all of the caps, all of the ammo, and all of the chems for yourself. And since you need experience and money, you could take those chems straight down to the chem station, craft yourself up some nice chems that'll sell for a pretty penny, and now you officially have enough money to get the operation going. It just works. Now that you know where to get all of your supplies to make your ammo and your upgrades for the Thirst Zapper, the only thing holding you back is 2 ranks in Gun Nut and 2 ranks in Science, which means you'll have to wait until you hit level 17, and that means you're going to be doing a lot of running around and crafting. Luckily, there's a couple pretty easy quests you can do that don't involve you killing anything. Hell, one of them you don't even have to be present, really. The Drumlin Diner and doing the interview for Piper are both super easy quests with some speech checks for extra experience. The 2 introductory quests for the Brotherhood of Steel give pretty decent XP, and Paladin Dance will practically solo both of those quests for you. Not to mention, you could pick up the Junk Jet while in Arc Jet, and that gun that Dan's gives you for completing the quest both sell for a pretty decent amount of money. Not to mention, if you've taken Ammo Scrounger like I recommended earlier somewhere along the line, you'll be drowning in fusion cell ammo. And the last major quest that I knocked out before finally hitting that sweet level 17 was the opening quest for the Automatron DLC. Ada will still pretty much take out all of the enemy robots by herself, and if you run around the area and become a distraction, it allows Ada to do more damage before getting knocked down. But once you have both those perks, you can finally craft the first damage upgrade for the Thirst Zapper, being the Nuka Cola launcher. Any ammo you've crafted up to this point is ready to go. You can now start the main campaign. So, heading straight to the Triggerman, it was time to see if the Thirst Zapper was all the rave. And luckily, I can skip the first 4 guys in the opening room and the next guys in the beginning of the subway station. But the 3 guys standing outside the vault door have to go. But so do the guys inside the vault door, and unfortunately these guys, and every single one of these guys that wants to follow me through the door. I won't lie, the damage on the Thirst Zapper wasn't anything to write home about, but being able to one-shot the lesser Triggerman was still pretty good, and 2 shots for the bigger ones isn't really that big a deal. Or at least that's what my thought process was at this point, considering how many shots I had saved up. But with Dino himself taking 3 shots, this got me really worried for boss fights and stronger enemies later on, because for some reason they invented Fallout 4 with the premise that you actually have to murder everything that comes in your way. And if it took me this much running around just to get 20 shots, was I gonna have enough to fight everything? So I decided I was going to have to let Nick do a lot of the heavy lifting for this section. So I just kind of sat and waited, and I even at one point got up and got pizza from the delivery guy while Nick was still dealing with 2 triggermen inside. But even though Nick was still doing most of the damage, I did have to help sometimes, because Nick has the lifespan of a beached whale, and since I was in combat, Nick wouldn't pick himself back up until the fight was over, which meant sometimes I had to shoot a couple of dudes. And by the time we got to the door with Skinny Malone on the other side, I was down to my last single shot, which meant there was no way in hell I was going to be able to win this fight. But luckily, you can talk your way out of it without shooting anyone. So after heading back to Diamond City and talking about whatever, I had to go scrounge up as many materials as I could, because if Dino himself took 3 shots, Kellogg was definitely going to take more than that, being able to use stim packs and all. So after a bit of running around, I was able to scrounge up 7 shots. Now, getting to Fort Hagen isn't all that difficult. The only downside within Fort Hagen is the amount of people with laser weapons. However, thankfully in his divine wisdom, Todd Howard decided that you didn't actually have to kill any of these guys on the top floor, and once you got far enough into Fort Hagen on the bottom half, Kellogg himself even called off the synths. Meaning that for the boss fight, realistically, all I had to do was kill Kellogg himself, get the stuff I needed, and get the hell out of Dodge. So let me pose a question to you. How many of those 7 shots that I came into Fort Hagen with did I actually use? If you guessed all of them, you're correct. But this was an eye-opener, considering every single shot cost a couple hundred caps apiece and materials were getting harder to come by due to my lack of caps. Moving forward, I was really only going to have to shoot what absolutely needed to be shot. So after making it to Good Neighbor and diving through the memories of a second-rate cereal brand, I got the quest to head to Virgil in South Florida. I've probably made this joke before, but if you've lived in Florida for any span of time, you'll know I'm right. Running through the glowing sea and making it to Virgil, I got the quest to chase down the Courser at Green Tech, but without enough ammo to fight him, it was time to go stock up on supplies. And luckily, Good Neighbor had a state house with tons of goodies to steal. Plus, if you have the perks I mentioned earlier, you can make a small fortune while raiding this building. But by far, getting the nuclear material still proved to be the hardest part of the challenge. Because realistically, you could spend an entire lifetime supply of caps purchasing the required ingredients or buying a shipment for a decent supply of ammo. But now having 10 rounds, it was time to take on the Courser. But as a pit stop, I visited Vault 88 and got far enough in that I got the ability to get a huge supply of nuclear material by scrapping a whole bunch of stuff inside. Only issue is, with all of the ammo I spent getting in, and with what resources I picked up, I was pretty much back where I started. Like, it was just a big waste of time. So now at Green Tech Genetics, running past the Gunners was pretty straightforward. But the Courser, man, I hate this guy. I went in with 10 shots, and due to the low splash damage, the high damage of the Courser, and the long ass reload animation, this took forever, because if he got low on health, he would just heal up, and because of how long it took to reload, he practically got the full health out of it. Not to mention that I had to stand still with a big shoot me in the face sign while I tried to deal decent damage. The whole thing was ridiculous. So I did what everyone does when life gives you lemons. Huff on a magical space inhaler and take enough drugs to take out a blue whale. But in the grand scheme of things, the jet only lasted 1 shot, and instead just made the reload animation twice as long. The real MVP of this fight was VATS. Not being able to miss and cutting the reload time in half was fantastic. With the Courser chip in hand, I headed over to the railroad headquarters and had to take out 5 ghouls with 3 shots, which, due to the explosion of the Thirst Zapper, wasn't actually as hard as I thought it was going to be. But I got the chip deciphered and made my way back to Virgil, which now started the faction part of the game. And at this point, I had to weigh my options with how many things I had to fight. If I did the Minutemen questline, besides doing all of the settlements, I'd have to not only take the castle, but then defend the castle. And since I'm only allowed to use the Thirst Zapper to do damage, setting up turrets and things like that just seemed like it was kind of cheating. Which is kind of the same way for the Brotherhood of Steel as well, because they have a mission where you straight up have to kill like 10 super mutants plus a behemoth. And I hate the railroad, so they were out of the question before we even began. So that left the Institute. But to get to the Institute, I had to get some ammo to at least deal with the raiders inside the Museum of Freedom. There's 7 raiders you have to take out, and I figured that if I at least had 7 shots, if I got lucky and only used 1 shot per raider, then I'd be on my way to the end of the game. And luckily, when I got to Concord, the end of the world was going on. Robots were attacking, and the raiders outside were getting turned into human Hot Pockets. Except instead of having pizza and cheese inside, because that is the only Hot Pocket that is even worth a mention, do not at me, they were being filled with lead. Inside the Museum of Freedom, I did get a couple of raiders to bunch up and save some ammo in the process, and then it came time for the raiders outside again. But the robots were quickly joined by the Brotherhood of Steel members, and I started the Deathclaw early to kind of help thin out the crowd. And between the nonsensical chaos that was going on here, somehow, some way, the Brotherhood of Steel still made it out on top. But I was now able to meet up with the Minutemen and Sanctuary to progress their quest line, which meant I needed some more ammo. Upon getting the quest to go visit Ten Pines Bluff, I tried to draw as much aggro onto myself as possible to have the local fauna take out the settlers. But because these guys are related to a quest line, I had to be the one to deal the last hit, which is fine for me because while they are sitting on the ground, they can't dodge a free dose of Nuka Cola. With the quest successfully failed, I had the Minutemen build the teleporter to get me into the Institute where I could go meet my colleagues that I'll never get to know the names of, and who will eventually steal my lunch from the community fridge. Now being tasked with more quests, I had to go kidnap a runaway synth who was leading a totally non-for-profit charity organization that helped people find a sense of belonging. Belonging on a hook hanging over the captain's quarters. So I had to sprint past all of the goons and talk him to sleep before letting my courser companion do the rest of the killing, which was way longer than it should have been. These coursers are supposed to be the Institute's secret weapons, and instead they're way worse than common raiders. After a job well done, somehow, I got tasked with tracking down some runaways, but instead of leading a cult, these guys were just playing a game of Dungeons & Dragons that happened to get interrupted by a 3-way spit-swapping makeout match. Luckily for me, I knew just how to miss me with that bullshit and spoke enough Abyssal to put them under a permanent state of brain melt to be safely transported away. After returning to Father, who praised my pacifist ways, told me I'd be the new chairman of the company in the event of his passing, and I finally could start ushering in harsher rules for lunch stealers. But moving on to the next quest, it would involve robots that absolutely had to perish, so it was time for a restock of ammo. But stocking up on supplies was easy this time round, as raiding the ammo and goods of the Fallen was helping a ton, and now when I made ammo, the Nuka Cola was actually the hardest thing to come by. The other resources were doing pretty well at this point. But now came the raid for the super battery, and I was going in with 15 shots. Surely that had to be enough, right? Running past the Brotherhood members was pretty easy, and soon I had the super battery in hand and could make my escape. That is until the robot guard showed up, but I had prepared for this. Only not enough. The sentry took more than half my ammo before I left the scientist friend to finish it off, but the 2 assaultrons that took its place were just as bad, each requiring 3 shots or 4 shots depending on where they were hit, so as you may have guessed, I was now out of ammo and had to rely on others to help me out. Which did take a while, but eventually we were allowed to move forward. Now all that stood between me and leaving was a lobby full of Brotherhood of Steel members and my synth homies. I couldn't help because I was out of ammo, but it did at least run around and pick up what I could sell for resources later on. But the Brotherhood members were doing a pretty good job defending their position, so much so that all my synth friends were killed and I had to make a rush to the exit. Surely this isn't foreshadowing for events to come. After returning to Father and having him stroke my ego and tell me how much of a good job I was doing, I was now tasked with hunting down a scientist that was being held captive inside a house surrounded by gunners. Except I went into this mission with very little ammo because I thought that I could have the local fauna take care of the guards, or sometimes there's synth spawns that happen here, so hopefully they'd be able to help me out. Which surprisingly worked. First I had a bunch of rogue robots show up, which caused quite a good amount of explosions. Then I had some synths teleport in and try to help thin out the crowd. They did manage to take down 2 gunners, but sadly this still left 2. So rather than wasting my ammo, I ran over to Grey Garden, which was just up the road, and had the robots there finish them off. Then I went inside the house to try my way with persuasion. Except when you're dressed like something out of a furry convention, people don't really care what you have to say, which meant that the Institute had to send in a problem solver to get the job done. Next came scrounging for Nuka Cola to make some ammo, and then setting up Diamond City to promote propaganda across the Commonwealth. But now came the last 2 quests of the run, and arguably, these were the worst. See, up until this point when things had to die, they were so low level that it usually took 1 shot, and if you grouped the enemies close enough together, you could take a couple of them down at the same time, obviously with the exception of the robots in the last mission. Here, though, that was very far from the truth. See, first up I had to do the end of the line quest, which involves taking out the railroad's hierarchy. So I went in with 5 shots because there are 5 targets. Desdemona only took 1, which was awesome. That meant we were off to a great start. Glory by herself took 4. Which meant for the first time in my entire time playing Fallout 4, I actually had to leave this quest and come back. But at this point, finding Nuka Cola was getting harder and harder, and because the Colonial Tap House was unmanned due to an unfortunate accident, I didn't know where else to get Nuka Cola besides going all the way back to Nuka World. Except Whitechapel Charlie in the 3rd Rail also sells Nuka Cola, and every 3 days his stock replenishes. So thankfully I was able to stock up on Nuka Cola, because the other thing I haven't mentioned up to this point is even though you can still pick up Nuka Cherry and Nuka Quantum, if you don't have the actual upgrade on the Thirst Zapper to fit those types of ammunitions, you straight up can't use them, and I found this out the hard way. So even if you craft them, there's literally no point unless you have the perks to do so. So you're actually better off not buying it or just using it as the resource it actually is. So now armed with a new set of ammunition, I charged back into the railroad headquarters and made sure they knew I meant business. Armed with 10 shots this time, it still took me 5 to put down the remaining 3 members. But with the job done, I could return to Father and move on to the final quest of the run. Now, in my head, I was thinking that I at least needed 3 shots, 1 for each of the final generators at the Boston airport. I was not prepared, however, for the absolute throttling the Institute was going to receive during this final quest. Like, any time since arrived on the scene, they were damn near wiped out immediately. It got so bad that where Liberty Prime is, the entire area surrounding his head where the synth uploads the virus, was full of Brotherhood members. And due to how many synths had died during this invasion, the Institute apparently cut me off, so the only one that was responding was the virus himself that doesn't fight back, which meant homie never stood a chance. So, for the second time in the run, I actually had to leave and scrounge up supplies, because if I didn't help the synths, there was no way in hell we stood a chance taking Liberty Prime. So, coming back armed with 6 shots and a new supply of synths that decided to help me out this time, the tides were very quickly turned. Like, I made all this ammo and didn't actually expect the new synths to come and help me, but with them showing up, it's almost like I didn't have to shoot anybody at all. It was the strangest thing. Like, I did shoot stuff, but not near enough as much as I thought I was going to have to. But after about 5 minutes of just hanging out and letting the synth virus do its thing, Liberty Prime was turned on our side, the Brotherhood magic sky blimp was shot out of the sky, and I could go show Father exactly what I thought of the Thirst Zapper. Honestly, if I had a way to make this gun do the damage it was doing at the beginning of the game, I would have said it was so broken. And so I completely understand why you need to have such a high level to even get the gun to deal damage. Because at the end of the game, I had leveled up to 25, which allowed me to get Gun Nut 3, which allowed me to put the Nuka Cherry modification on, and the damage is damn near doubled. Not to mention, if you put the Nuka Quantum modification on, you're doing like 600 damage. Like, it's just straight up ridiculous. The added splash damage of this weapon was also a run saver in multiple occasions. Now, would I recommend this run to anyone? No, absolutely not. This run took twice as long as some of my other runs because so much of it went into gathering supplies or finding items to sell just so I had caps to purchase the things required to make the ammo. It's a fun gun to play around with if you've already done the Nuka World DLC and you just kind of want to goof off in the Commonwealth or use mods or whatever, but as a main damage dealer for the entire run, you're better off just using literally anything else and just upgrading it as you go. So, can you beat Fallout 4 only using a Thirst Zapper? Yes. Yes, you can. Should you? No. No, you shouldn't. If you liked what you saw, please make sure to like the video and consider subscribing as it helps the channel out a ton. If you have a suggestion for a run you'd like to see, make sure to leave it in the comments down below. As always, I've been Chris from Crisis Gaming, and I will see you on the next one.